You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lemons podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're gonna make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. This week's episode is with Miss Madysyn, and she is an incredibly talented singer-songwriter and musician based in Nashville, Tennessee. Fun fact, she is the daughter of YouTube comedian superstar Jack Vale. I'm excited for this conversation because we dive into a whole range of topics. We talk about her songwriting process and what it's like collaborating by herself and writing music in this difficult time of quarantine, because we've all struggled creatively and productively in quarantine. So we dive into her process and what she's doing to keep up with her songwriting, if she's collaborating with other artists, how she's doing that. We talk about how she's working with her brother, who's also very talented in music. We talk about the relationship that she has with her brother in writing music, and then the relationship she has working with the big producers that she's working with and how they differ. We also talk about the importance of a manager and how her team has greatly helped her with her career and the importance of a good relationship with a manager. We talk about a whole range of other things as well, but those are some of my favorites in this conversation. So before we dive in, I want to remind you to please sign up to my mailing list, as it helps me notify you when new episodes like this are live. I'd also appreciate if you would leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and feel free to subscribe there as well, as it helps build the community and it helps the show be discovered by new listeners as well. I'd also appreciate if you would give me a follow on Instagram and check that out, because I do post my podcasts and you can keep up with my daily life there if you're so inclined or interested. And lastly, if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, there is a guest request link to a form below. So fill that out and I will reach out if you or the guest is a good guest, I guess. I always trip over the words for that for some reason. But if you're a good guest or the person you send it over to is a good guest, I will reach out and we'll set that up. So without further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Madysyn. First of all, thank you for being on the show. I'm really excited. I'm glad that your publicist had reached out and connected. And how are things doing for you? Or are you in quarantine still? Where are you at, and all that stuff?
Things are going all right. I am in quarantine, and honestly, it's been pretty good for me because I've just been writing like a lot more than I usually have, because I'm kind of forced to, but in a good way.
Yeah. And where are you coming to us from?
I am from Nashville, Tennessee right now.
Okay, cool. And so you've been writing a lot of music. How is it a little bit different from typically writing music? Because I mean, now you're in quarantine and you're kind of like forced to stay home. Like, do you find yourself being more creative? Do you find yourself being less creative? Like, how is it writing music in quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, when quarantine wasn't a thing, I would love to write with other writers. I would go with co-writing all the time, and it's great. So just right now, it's just me and my piano, and there's not a lot of, I'm not really experiencing things right now because of what's going on. So I think it's kind of like helped in a way, because it's made me like really work harder and kind of think outside of the box with ideas and creativeness.
What do you mean, like work outside the box? Like what are you doing differently?
I've been like really pushing myself, I guess, especially with song ideas, like things that I usually wouldn't write about or things that I haven't written about yet. I find myself whenever I'm writing and just blurting out song melodies and lyrics, it's usually relationship based. And I think that's most writers like go to, just because it's so easy and relatable. So I've been trying to write as many like non-relationship based songs as possible.
Yeah, it's hard to write about things that you haven't experienced. Like I've tried writing songs, and I have experiences, but I don't have that many. Like I'm only been in one relationship, and still in that relationship. So I could write about that, but it's like a lot of people, I feel like they get their heart broken and they can write like 3 albums. It could be like Adele.
Yeah, definitely.
How's your family doing? Is everybody okay? How's Tennessee? Are they opening up, or how are things like in that realm?
Slowly, like little restaurants and bars are starting to open, just the small ones. I'm pretty sure all the honky tonks downtown Nashville are closed. And me and my family are all safe and healthy, which is a good thing. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, I seen a couple parks starting to open, so they're making their way.
Yeah, it's same thing kind of out here in California. We're slowly starting to open up, but it's a little too slow. I'm getting anxious to get out of the apartment and explore the beautiful state of California. Is your family kind of a musical family? I know that in the form that the publicist had filled out, that your dad is Jack Vale, and I've been a fan of him for 10, 12 years since on YouTube.
Oh, no way.
But yeah, I've been a huge fan. My brothers have been a fan. My brother's actually a big fan of yours as well. I asked him like, hey, do you know who this Madysyn is? Because I saw he had liked your Facebook page, and I'm like trying to get as much information and research about you as possible. And he's like, oh yeah, I know who she is. So yeah, this was kind of cool to like everything kind of coming full circle. Yeah, but is your family, like, is your mom and dad musical? Do you have any brothers and sisters? Like, tell us about Madysyn, and tell us about how you got into music and all that fun stuff.
Okay, yeah. So both of my parents grew up singing in church, so they both have beautiful voices. I have 2 older brothers who are both musically inclined. They're not singers, but they can play like guitar, drums, pretty much everything. And then my 2 younger siblings they're 9 and 10. So, 9 and 11. So they're not really sure what they want to do yet, but they're both taking like vocal lessons because they're interested in it, and guitar. So it's kind of like the entire family. We just all love music, which I think is really fun. We all get together and like jam out sometimes. It's nice.
Do you play any instruments, and what instruments do your family play, or do they just sing?
I play piano, and right now I'm trying to teach myself guitar. I love the electric guitar, and that's what my oldest brother plays mainly. And my dad can play a little bit guitar, but my mom just sings. And yeah, I don't know. I've always been like super fond of electric guitar, so once quarantine started, I was like, okay, now is my time to like really sit down and get this.
Yeah, that's kind of how. Did you find yourself like when quarantine kind of started, like you set a checklist of things you wanted to get done, like whether it be personally or professionally, like musically, where you're like, oh, I'm going to learn guitar, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn how to do that, I'm going to write 10 songs, or did you just kind of like let it go?
Yeah, I mean, even before quarantine, I have like certain goals for myself that I'll like write down before I go to bed. That way the next day I can finish them. And that's always like write at least 1 song, which I usually do every single day, practice piano skills and all that. But when it comes to guitar, I tried to play a couple years ago, and I just got so frustrated with it, and it just like did not click for me for some reason. So I eventually was like, ugh, whatever, like screw this. And then I got mad at myself like recently, because I was like, that's no reason to quit something that you want to do, is because I was just mad at myself. I was like, I can't just quit. So this was just like all the more reason to start practicing again.
Yeah, it's. I told myself when quarantine first started that I was like, I'm gonna learn violin, and I have yet to buy one. It's easier said than done. Like, it's easy to like sit down and make a list, but it's a lot more difficult to like actually maneuver yourself to do those things. You went viral at a young age after your dad had posted a clip of you singing, was it Naughty Boy and Sam Smith La 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 on Facebook. Can you tell us kind of about that moment and like going like one day you're not viral and then the next day you're like a global sensation. Can you tell us like about that transition and what it's like?
Yeah. So that was, I believe I want to say 12 or 13. And I was at a singing camp because I've been fond of singing ever since I could talk. I wrote my first song when I was 9. And so once I was 12, I went to my first singing camp and my parents were just dropping me off. And to get into some of the classes, you'd have to audition. So the Sam Smith song is what I was going to audition with. And I was practicing for my parents to see what they thought. And he just happened to be recording me without me knowing. And then I wasn't really using social media at the time because I was so young. So once that blew up, I was like in awe, and I was like, oh my goodness, like none of us expected that at all, especially because it was just a very candid moment, and I wasn't expecting it. So when it did happen, a bunch of like fake Madysyn accounts started coming up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I need maybe I should like actually create an actual account and like start using it, because these like fake accounts were getting followers, and I was like, people think that's me. So I made social media, and I think overnight that got like 10 million views, and then I think now it has 20. And honestly, it was just very unexpected, but a very, very cool experience. So that's kind of how I got here where I am now, is because like that was the very start of it.
And was that kind of like a kick in the butt to like, maybe I'm onto something? Like, I mean, obviously you're very involved, like your family's very musical, but like, was that kind of like, oh, like I've gone viral and people are actually liking me and like my singing, like maybe I need to pursue this? Or did you know before that you wanted to pursue music as a career? Or did you have another goal in life?
Yeah. I mean, singing was always the one constant in my life. So but it was a hobby. So when I went to the singing camp and then that blew up and everything, I was like, wow, like, I mean, I've always enjoyed this, but now people enjoy me enjoying it. So it was kind of like I should do this like for real.
And what have you kind of learned from it? Like, obviously, like going viral is not something everybody plans on, but when that happened, what did you kind of learn from it? Like, obviously, like one, getting your social media and like kind of setting things up. Did you start working on getting a team together? Did your family start getting a team together? Like, what were kind of the next steps for you?
It was once I got my social media, I was like, okay, well now I want to start actually like releasing videos. So I would put up singing videos every single day up on my Facebook, and then they were just like candid little videos my dad would take of me, and they were doing really well. So I was like, I want to make music videos. So I went and found a recording studio in LA, and I worked with him. And we started recording them. That way I could film music videos and put it on my YouTube channel. And once I got my YouTube channel is when I started posting all my music videos, and that's when I was like getting really serious about it. And I was like, this is like really, really what I want to do.
Yeah. And you're primarily focusing on like yourself and your own music, right? Are you doing a lot of features? Are you doing a lot of vocals for other artists? Like, what are you doing as an artist?
Yeah, I've definitely been focusing on myself, but I have done a couple features. I did a song called Tropics with Rarely. Sorry, it's a complicated word to pronounce. And I did a feature with the band Between Us, and we sang a song called Wait. And my friends Nevermind, who are in a duo band together, I just recorded a song with them that they're going to release on their Spotify. So I've been doing a few stuff here and there, but mainly focusing on myself.
What's it like writing with another artist versus writing on your own? Like, what are some things that you learn from writing by yourself, and then some other things that you're learning when you're writing with other people? Like, and which do you prefer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've written with a lot of people, so I've had a lot of different experiences. And it really depends on who you're working with and if your guys' personalities click. When I first moved to Nashville, that's when I really started writing with a bunch of other people. And I've had great experiences where we totally vibed and like we knew what we wanted with the song, and we were both like just equal. And then I've had other experiences where our personalities just like they didn't really click, so it was a little more difficult. Like I wanted something and they wanted something else as far as like melody or lyrics, but there's always compromise. So comparing that to like writing just by myself, there's definitely more creative control, obviously, and I think there's pros and cons to both, because when I write by myself, sometimes there's always like writer's block, and sometimes I'll get stuck and be like, I don't know what this needs right now. And then when you're writing with other writers, they kind of like take the words out of your mouth, or say like, oh, this is what that needs. And you're like, yes, like that is what I wanted, but I just couldn't think of it. So there's definitely like good things and bad things for both.
How important, or how do you find other songwriters and collaborators to like that are able to like kind of pull the words out of your mouth, rather than you just kind of like, nah, I don't like that, and that's all you do. You just go back and forth and like, no, I want this, no, I want this, I want this. And how do you find, and how do you continue to work and maintain that relationship of these incredible people that can just kind of like pull the words out of your mouth and know exactly what you're trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, once that happens and you meet another writer like that, it's super important, I think, to stay in touch and continue writing together, because there's definitely something special there. I know there's a handful of writers that I've written with that we just clicked and bounced off each other really well. So I've stayed in touch with them, and we try to write as much as possible.
And when you're writing on your own, what is kind of like the flow for you? Like, what do you need in order to write a song? Like, can you just sit down and it just flows out? Do you have to go out like on some kind of inspiration quest, like on a walk or a bike ride or a jog or something? Like, what is it that you need in order to like sit down and write a song?
Yeah, I usually, in my notes, I have a list of song titles. So I'll usually start title first, which is a little different than the process for most people. At least the people that I've talked to, they're like, oh, I've never done it that way. But I always, because I'll hear someone say something and I'll be like, oh, that's a great song title, and I'll just put it in my notes. So then when it comes to writing, I set a certain time a day, every single day for that specifically, and I'll look through my titles and be like, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. And then I do melodies, piano, and write the music, and then comes melody and then lyrics.
So you just have a whole list of titles and you're just like, oh, this is how I'm feeling today. You find the one that you can relate to the most in that moment and you just run with it.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. And do you ever have that where you're like, you're not feeling any of them? Like, what do you do in that moment?
Yeah, in that moment, I'll just skip that, go to music, and whatever I'm feeling, if it's like major chords or minor chords, whatever the emotion behind it is, and then melody, and then lyrics, and then title will come later, of course. But I usually just try to write off of what I'm feeling in the moment.
Interesting. So a lot of people like the songwriters that I know oftentimes start with like they'll write the song and then they'll pick the title because of like one of the lyrics in there. It's like it just stands out so much. So it's interesting to hear that you go off of the titles and then you write based on that. That's interesting. Like it's so interesting to hear about how people write their music.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everyone's different.
When you're inspired, like you said that you start with the piano and the chords and everything. So how long does it usually take to write a song? And like from the first measure to the last, how long does it take to write a song? And what do you do like if you get stuck and you're like, oh, I can't get this out, I don't know what to do? Do you pass it on to somebody else, or do you come back to it, or what do you do?
Yeah, I've written songs within like 10 minutes, and I've written others within days. So it definitely depends on, I think, the song and my mood. I have this really bad habit of writing choruses, and that's it. I'll write the chorus and then I won't be able to connect the verses or the bridge or anything. And I'll just have these choruses all in my phone that I'm just stuck and I don't know what to do with them. So that I usually will have, I'll like send it to my friends or like other writers and be like, what do you think I should do with this? But that's just a really bad habit of mine. Usually, I think the average time it takes me when I'm writing is probably like an hour, maybe 2 hours.
And do you ever have those moments where you're sitting down and you're at the piano and everything is just kind of like flowing and you just get that rush of energy? I know I've had it when I'm writing music, and you just have this rush of energy and you're like, this is my best song I've ever done, like ever. And I'll never ever be able to write anything better than this. Do you ever have those moments?
I had that moment once with a specific song of mine. I actually have it tattooed on me because...
Oh, wow. It was that inspirational.
Yeah. It was really late at night, and I was just... something was just heavy on my heart, and I was like, I want to write about this. And I did, and it's an inspirational... I don't want to say like worship song, but I guess in a way it is. But it's called You Walk With Me. I haven't released it anywhere or anything, but I did get it tattooed on me.
And do you plan on releasing it? And can you tell us a little bit about like the story behind it? I'm curious now that you've got it tattooed on you. You've got to tell the story.
I mean, I had just went on I don't know what you would call it. It was a church, I don't know what you would call it. It was a church event, I guess, for a bunch of young adults, and the messages and the music and everything was just very inspiring. I brought my journal with me so I could like take note of everything. It was just very heavy on my heart. And when I got home from that trip, that was the same night that I wrote this song. And it's called You Walk With Me, and it's basically just about never being alone, because I am a spiritual person and I believe in God, and so that's basically what the song is about. Is even through like every single tough time that I've ever had, I've always had that constant in my life, and God has always been there for me. So that's basically what the song is to me, and it was just I feel like it was just a really important thing for me personally that I had to do.
And do you plan on releasing this song, or like how do you decide what you want to release and what you don't, like, or do you often write songs that are just for you?
Yeah, with this song I'm actually not sure, because it is like a really special song to me, so that I'm like, well, maybe I should just like keep that between me and God. But then at the same time I'm like, well, what if like it has the same impact on somebody else that it did me? So I've been like debating whether or not I should record and release it or not. But maybe I will one day. But I do have a ton of songs in my phone that I'm just like, well, I'm just going to keep these. And I don't think they're not good enough to release, but at the same time, like, yeah, I don't think they're like good enough. But I have so many songs that, I have that I'm going to release, and a lot that I have that I'm not going to.
Yeah, and I think it's important too. Like, you don't have to release everything you write. Like, it's okay to have music that's just for you or your family or friends. You know, you don't have to release a song you write with your friends. It can just be a fun song that, you know, you can just cherish that moment. It's like, I really like that, but I don't think it's necessary to release it. Well, it doesn't have to be released. Like, it's okay to like write songs that are just for you to like channel that energy and just live in the moment for a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Do you produce any of your own music, or do you just focus on the songwriting? And like, what's the process like when you're finished writing a song? Where do you go? Like, what's the next step for you?
Yeah, I wish I could produce. I've been writing a lot with my brother, and he is great at production and making the music on his computer and stuff like that. I wish I could. I might have him teach me because I think it's really interesting. But I do focus on just the lyrics and the melody and the song part, and not so much the production and mastering and mixing. I'm really fond of it though, so I might learn. But once we have the song completed is usually when I sit down and I like to listen to it over and over and be like, okay, like, is this good enough to release? I like to think about the visual a lot. And I think from there, I have to run everything by my team also. So, me and my manager will talk about it and put together like release dates, and if we want it to be a single or if we want it to be in an EP or an album. And that's kind of like where I am right now. I have a bunch of songs I've recorded that are just like sitting there waiting for the right time. And I think we're going to put together an EP that I'm hoping can come out next year.
How old is your brother? And does he do all of your production, or does he just do some songs?
He is 20 years old, and he's done some songs. He doesn't do all of them. The producer that I've worked with the most is Forrest Glenn Whitehead, who he lives here in Nashville, I believe. And he's great. He's worked with Kelsey Ballerini and artists like that. And he's super talented. But me and my brother do mostly like behind the scenes kind of songs, like just stuff for fun or stuff that I can like throw up on my SoundCloud.
Okay, so do you ever release the stuff that you guys work on together, or is it just like for fun and you just kind of share it on SoundCloud and whatever it does, it does?
Yeah, I don't think any of them have been on my Spotify, so it's definitely more of like a sibling kind of thing. Like let's have fun, let's write some stuff.
Yeah, and what's it like working with your brother and then working with somebody where you're actually going to like release the music on Spotify? Like, what's that relationship with, and how do you kind of balance them both? Like, is the dynamic different?
Yeah, I mean, one is more like business, I feel like, and the other is just us kind of screwing around and having fun. But the producers that I have worked with for legit singles that I've put out, that's always like fun and awesome too. Like I love doing both.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have that dynamic, and it's fun where you can like, if you're having that moment of like super creativity, you have that team and that person you can go to kind of like make it happen. And then when you're just kind of like in a silly mood and you just want to jam with your brother, you have that too. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. I was going to say you're going to be like the next Billie Eilish and Phineas, but it doesn't sound like that.
I mean, maybe.
So are you signed to, like, do you have a record label deal, or are you completely independent? Like,
I don't. I'm independent right now. And awesome. It's going well for me. I mean, I'm really happy with where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I work for Ari Herstand. He's like the DIY go-to guy for independent musicians. And like, I've learned from working with him that independent musicians can make a living, and they do. Like, you have built an incredible brand and a name for yourself. And, I applaud that for being so young as well. And, turning yourself into who you are today and the artist that you are today. It's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. How do you think things would be a little bit different if you were signed to a label? And do you plan on signing to a label? Do you have a publishing deal? Like, are you strictly going to remain independent?
I know that's a big thing that I have to do more research on and like really think about. It definitely depends on the label, I feel like, because something that happens to a lot of artists is you sign to a big label and then they just shelf you, which would be a super big bummer. Don't want that.
No.
And so when you're independent, you definitely have more freedom of the music you want to do and finding your sound. And I think it's really important especially for me right now, because I just turned 18. So I'm really like trying to find my sound exactly, because I've definitely gone through different phases growing up with like what genre of music I want to do. So I definitely think it's important for me right now to stay independent, at least for a little bit, so I can really like buckle down and say, okay, this is me, this is Madysyn, this is what I sound like, and this is what I'm going to continue doing. Because I wouldn't want to sign with somebody and then have them say, we want you to do this and you're going to do this.
Yeah, that would be a logistical nightmare and a creative nightmare for any independent artist. You know, you've been independent for, for how many years? 6 years now, since you kind of exploded and you kind of have been doing your own music. So like this is like all you know. So getting signed to a label and it would just be like you're working for them now. Essentially, they're going to take your vision and they're going to tell you who you need to be. And I've seen it happen where they sign to a 5-year deal and they write 6 albums and the label shelves them and they'll never see the light of day. And sadly, that still happens. So yeah, good on you for remaining and knowing what you want. That's cool. So do you have any like dream collaborations that you want to work with? Is there anybody out there that you would just like, oh my gosh, I have to collaborate with this? Or who are like your top 4 or 5?
Okay. This is kind of like not realistic at all, but
never say never, like Justin Bieber.
John Mayer is my like number one inspiration. He's incredible. There's not one song that I don't like from him. So like in my fantasy dream world, it would be a song with John Mayer. Absolutely. He's literally like a musical prodigy. It's incredible.
He absolutely is.
Yes, I could literally talk about him all day.
Well, what are some other ones?
Tori Kelly has been an inspiration of mine since I was younger. I think I saw her in concert when I want to say I was like 12 or 13, and we were at NAMM, which is like this little music convention in LA. And that was the first time I'd heard of her or seen her. And it was a very small, like super small venue. And me and my brother were front row, and she was incredible. She has an amazing sound and amazing voice. And her writing skills are also incredible. So definitely Tori Kelly.
Yeah, she was on American Idol too, wasn't she?
She was, and Simon Cowell hated her. And I got so mad. She literally sang like an angel, and he was like, your voice is annoying. And I was like, oh my goodness, are you insane?
Yeah, that sounds like Simon though. That definitely sounds like Simon. I mean, it feels like whenever you have those shows, like Simon will always have something negative to say about the really good ones. And then when somebody who's like not good and is very weird and is just like totally not fit for American Idol or any singing competition for even a local talent show, he's like, oh, this is like one of the best I've heard. Like there's so much. It's like, what are you talking about, Simon? Like Tori Kelly she's got an incredible voice. She's an incredible guitar player. She's beautiful. Like she's just like a full on pop star, like Taylor Swift picturesque. When you talked about like, I want to go back just a little bit. So the next, like after you're done writing the song and you're working with your producer and you're kind of thinking about like the graphics, like do you do your own graphics or do you hire somebody else out? Like, I mean, I know you're independent, but how deep do you go into like creating the graphics and things like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, for my last single, Girlfriend, this is kind of funny. I was like, okay, I know what I want to do for this. Like, I have this vision, guys, like, bear with me. And I tried to like sketch it out, and basically everyone hated it. And I was like, so bummed. But I was like, I think it's so, like, I asked my friends and everyone, they were like, Madysyn, like, what's wrong with you? This is not good. And I was like, guys, I love it. But we ended up not going with it because I was like, fine, majority rules. We just ended up using a picture of myself. But I was like, I guess that's fine anyways, because it was like my first single in 3 years. So I was like, I guess people should probably know what I look like. So I'll just use a picture of myself. But yeah, we didn't use my sketch, sadly. But I do like to, when it comes to visuals, I like to listen to the song and picture like the different colors it's giving me, like the different like vibes and stuff. I love putting visuals to the song. So I definitely have a part in it when it comes to that. Like for Girlfriend, I was seeing a lot of blue, which is why the picture I ended up using of myself, we had a blue background. And just, yeah, I don't know, stuff like that. I like to put the colors to the song.
And all that comes to you when you're listening to the song, right?
Yeah.
Are you thinking about these types of things like when you're writing the song, or is it after it's like completely mixed and mastered, right before, like when does this kind of come?
It's usually always when the song's completely done, because then I can shift over to, okay, what is this, like, what is the visual for this? Like when I'm writing it, I don't think about it very much, and I don't see the colors at all until it's completely done, because I'm just focused on the musical side of it. So once it's all done, I'm like, okay, my brain can rest on that side of it. What is this going to be? And then it goes into the visual.
I feel like when you're writing music, sometimes it's so easy to see the different colors that are kind of like floating around. Like I know for me, when I'm just sitting down and just playing chords on my piano, I can kind of picture colors. So it's interesting that you're not kind of like seeing that as you're writing the music. And I understand like, oh, I don't focus on that, but it's interesting that you don't kind of like see the colors until like after you can kind of sit back and be like, okay, now I can like dive in and see and really try to picture this.
Yeah, but that's so cool. Like I wish that I saw and felt like colors like that while I was writing. I think that's super cool that you can do that. I wish.
Well, there's a challenge for you. Take a picture you've never seen. Maybe it's one that you went on with a family vacation or just on a walk or something, and set the picture in front of you at the piano and just start playing chords and just see what comes of it. Like draw inspiration from the picture and just see what comes out of it.
That's such a good idea. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and you'll have to let me know when you do it, because I definitely want to listen to it and see how it relates to the picture. And then you could come up with a song just based on the picture.
I will. Wait, have you ever done that?
I haven't done it in a while. I used to do it when I had a little more time on my hands. But now that I've just kind of brought it up, now I'm inspired to do that. So now I'm going to like go and look through my phone and see if I can find a picture that's like full of colors and or even one that's just I've seen somewhere and just like, oh, and just set it in front of me and just like focus on it and just whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, that's such a good idea.
What are your team members? Like, who do you have on your team? Do you have a manager? Do you have a booking agent? Like, who are the members on your team?
I do have a manager, and I have PR, and then I have a distribution company which I distribute my music through, and I also have a social media manager, and I think that's the whole team. Yes, PR, manager, social media manager, and distribution.
Cool. And who do you distribute through? Do you know?
45.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. As long as you like them and they're working for you, that's awesome. So how did you assemble your team? Was it just kind of one that just kind of fell into place? Are they friends of yours? Like, is your manager a good friend, or is it through an agency that you found and discovered, or how did you kind of assemble your team?
Yeah. So a couple years ago, I was on a TV show, and through that TV show, my manager found me. So the show was called The Pop Game, and it was me and 3 other singers, or was it 4 other singers? 4 other singers, excuse me. And it was basically just like a singing competition show, but like a boot camp kind of for singers. And they would have special guests, special artists on it, like at least every other episode. And for one of them, it was Jordan Sparks. So Jordan Sparks' manager reached out to me and asked to have a meeting. So we had a meeting with him and another guy who is also a manager. And we kind of did like a duo kind of deal. So I had 2 managers at the time. And then when I moved to Nashville, I ended up, one of them ended up parting ways. It was mutual. It was all good. No bad blood at all. He's great. But now I'm only with one of them. Sorry, that was like kind of complicated.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, definitely makes sense. So can you talk a little bit about your role and the manager's role and how you guys kind of work together, and what are some things that the manager has done for you that you would have never been able to accomplish on your own? Like, I'm curious to dig in to that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, my manager found my PR company for me. And so that's obviously been a huge help. He's also introduced me to plenty of people that I'm still in close relationship with, industry-wise, and we have a good thing going. He's great. I love him. And my first single that I released, Fall For You, which was, I think, 3 years ago, he introduced me to the co-writers and the producer that are on that song. And that was like a really important thing for me, because that was like the first song I ever wrote with like another like person in the industry, and it was a super cool experience. So yeah, he got that for me, and he's done a lot, so he's great.
But he hasn't introduced you to John Mayer just yet, has he?
Not yet, no.
I want to dig into the manager aspect of it, because I see so many people that want a manager and they're just like, I don't want to do this, and that. I want a manager so they can do that stuff so I don't have to deal with it. But I've also seen managers completely screw artists because they're not keeping the artist completely informed on what they're doing. So it's very muddy water. So then, like, I mean, I've even heard it as far as like the manager is keeping like they're getting paid for $10,000 for a show, and they're pocketing, say, $8,000, and they're only passing $2,000 on to the artist. And it's just like they're completely destroying an artist's career. So can you talk about how important the manager's involvement is in your career, and like why working as a team is much better than just kind of like passing things off to one another and say, you do that, I'll do this?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's definitely important to have, I mean, I was going to say a personal relationship, but like at the same time it is business. So I do understand when people are like, I just want my manager to do this, and like, that's why I'm going to get a manager so he can handle that side. But then it is like that, well, what if he does screw you over? So there needs to be like a little bit of personal relationship and like, you know, working with each other rather than him working for you or you working for him, which I do have. It's definitely like a healthy balance. So I think that's really important, and to know what's going on and what exactly he or she is doing for you is really important, and just like to stay in the loop.
Yeah, it's very important to stay in the loop of everything that is going on, because at the end of the day, they're working for you. It's not the other way around. And I think a lot of people get that confused, and it's just like, I want a manager. Well, why do you want a manager? And then they can't come up with anything. A manager will come to you if you're building that bridge for them to climb over. Like, it's easier for them to jump on a moving train than it is to build one from scratch. And that's just how the manager system works. Is they want to jump on a moving train, and like for you, you're a good example. You were on this show. You were there's 3 or 4 other people performing on this TV show. You're incredibly talented. You had a great voice, and they were seeing that you had built up a reputation. Like, you went viral at a young age, and you just had stuff going for you already. So that's why the manager reached out. So I just think it's very interesting in how it works, and like every manager is different and every relationship is different with managers. So it's so cool to see that there are a lot of artists out there that are working with their manager, not letting their manager just work for them and just kind of do their own thing.
Definitely, yeah, I totally agree.
that's pretty much all I have for you. This was a great conversation. I'm glad that Caitlin had reached out and connected us. How can the listeners keep up with you and all of the music and the amazing work that you're doing as an artist?
You can follow me on my streaming platforms. It's just Madysyn, Madysyn, and all my social medias are the same.
And I will put all of your social medias in the show notes below as well, so people can easily click and then follow you and check out all the stuff that you're doing.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. Glad to hear you're doing okay. Glad the family's doing okay. And I hope you guys continue to stay safe and healthy.
You too.